If you want to learn After Effects but have never opened it before, or opened it once and immediately felt overwhelmed, this video is for you. I'll walk you through exactly how to create this animation so you can see how After Effects works step by step. You'll get a lot more out of this video if you download the free project files and follow along. I've also included a cheat sheet to help you remember what you learn. This video is the first lesson in my beginner After Effects course, so if you want to keep learning through short practical projects, then check that out as well. I've broken down the process of creating an animation in After Effects into 5 simple steps, but instead of just talking about the steps, let's actually do them together. Once you've downloaded the project files, open up After Effects. If you see this screen, click New Project. And if you already see this screen, this is a new project. From here, we need a container to hold our animation. That's called a composition. So you can click this New Composition button right here. Let's give it a name. I'm going to use a width and height of 1920 by 1080 because this is standard HD. Also, square pixels makes a lot of sense. And then for the frame rate, I'm going to use 30 frames per second. For animation, it's nice to work in whole numbers. That way your timeline is nice and neat. But if you're working to specifically put animation on top of a video, you might want to match the frame rate of the video, which might be something like 29.97. I'm going to make my composition 4 seconds. So this is going to be hours, minutes, seconds, and then frames. Then let's hit OK. You'll see the new composition in the project panel here. This is where everything that you import into After Effects and all of your compositions lives. It's kind of like a media library. Then down here, you should see a tab that shows your open composition, but there's nothing in the composition yet, which is also why the composition viewer just looks black. You can have multiple compositions in an After Effects project file, but now that that button is gone, to make a composition, you either need to go to Composition, New Composition, or you can click on this little button down here. And if you need to get back to the composition settings, you can change those later, even after you've created your composition and added some animation. You can go to Composition, Composition Settings. Before we go any further, it's important to know some best practices, which is file organization. So I'm going to save this project file. You can do Command or Control S or go to the File menu to find Save, and then navigate to the folder on your computer where you have the project files. Already in that folder, I created you an AE folder where you can store your After Effects project files, and so we just need to give this a name. It's important to keep all of your project files organized because if you move a file later, even if it's the After Effects project file, or it could be something like that you've imported into After Effects won't know where that file went because it's just creating a link to its current location. So that's why it's important to stay organized from the start, so you're not accidentally moving files around and having things go missing. From here, just hit Save. The next step is to gather all of the assets, the things that we want to animate. So let's start by importing those Photoshop files that I've provided you. So you can go up to File, Import File, and then navigate to those files on your computer. You can import one file at a time, or you can do multiple at a time. So I'm going to hold down Shift to select all 3 of these Photoshop files. Then this part is really important. Make sure that you have Import As set to Composition Retain Layer Sizes. If you don't see that option, click this Show Options button. So again, Composition Retain Layer Sizes is very important. Then hit Open. Now in the project panel, we have 3 new compositions, one for each of the Photoshop files. And there's also a folder of all of the layers that were in that Photoshop file. It's good to get in the practice of staying organized in your project panel, and I like to try to mirror as much as possible the folder structure on my computer. So to create a folder, you can just hit this little button, and then I'm just going to name this something like Photoshop or Assets or something like that, and then just drag in all of those Photoshop files and their folders into that. To open a composition, just double click on it, and then it will open up in the timeline. I'm going to switch back over into the orientation composition. You can also create assets right inside of After Effects. Let's create a background. I like to use a shape layer for the background. So if you go up here, this is the shape tool. If you click and hold, there's other tools underneath it, but I want to just use the rectangle tool. Once you select a tool, you can click and drag out a shape in your composition viewer, but if you want the shape to fill the entire screen, a shortcut is just to double click on the tool. And I can go up here to Fill to change the color. So I'm just going to paste in a hex code for this green. Feel free to copy this exact code if you want the same color. Then it's always a good idea to label your layers. So I'm going to go down to the shape layer 1, select it, and then hit return, and then give it a name. And then hit return again to save that name. Let's also create a text layer. So I'm going to go up to the text tool and then just click to start typing. When you're finished typing, you can go back up to the selection tool by clicking it here. Depending on what type of layer you have selected, the properties panel will display different properties. By default, the properties panel for you is probably over here. But if you want to move things around and customize your workspace, all you have to do is click on the panel name and then just drag the panel into one of these highlighted areas. From the properties panel, you can change the font, and you can install this font if you want the same font as me by clicking on this button and going to Adobe Fonts. And you can change the size and other properties of the text. To perfectly center this, you can use the Align panel, which is over here, and I'm just going to center it horizontally and vertically. If you ever don't see one of the panels that you need, you can find it underneath the Window menu. Now let's add the Photoshop files to our composition. So I'm going to go back over to the project panel here, and then I'll double click on the chocolate bar composition to open it in the timeline. We can copy and paste these layers into our orientation composition. So just select them both and then hit Command or Control C to copy, switch back over into the orientation composition, and hit Command or Control V to paste. And then we can just drag these into place or use the Align tools to center them. You'll notice that the layer order in the timeline matters. So right now the chocolate bar is underneath the package, but if I drag it above, now it's visible. I'm just going to undo that. Another way that you can add your assets to your composition is to open up the folder of layers from Photoshop and then just select all of the layers and drag them and drop them into the composition viewer or into the timeline. Now these are all on top of each other, so I'm going to need to drag them out and space them out, but I'll do that step later. Let's just close this up, and then I'm going to double click on the cacao beans and just copy and paste 6 that I like. I'm not going to use them all. Wherever there's a bar for your layer on the timeline, that's where that layer is going to be visible. So let's say we don't want the cocoa beans, the cocoa nibs, the chocolate package, or the chocolate bar to come in until like 1 second and 15 frames right here. We can drag the start of all of these layers back so that now they're not visible for this first 1 second and 15 frames, and then they become visible here. Let's also trim the text layer so that it ends right when these layers start. You can scrub through your timeline by just dragging the playhead around, or you can actually play back your animation, not that we really have an animation right now, by hitting the spacebar. Step 3 is to set keyframes to make things move. But before we do that, let's arrange these layers in the final state that we want to animate them into. So if you open up a layer by toggling the little triangle here, you'll see these transform properties. So I'm going to rotate the chocolate bar so we can see it behind the package, and then I'll go into the package and rotate this the other direction. Then I'm going to move these cocoa beans into place and also rotate them. So if you have a layer selected and you have lots of layers in your timeline, a quick way to scroll to that layer is to hit the X key. And then if you want to quickly get to a certain property, you can use keyboard shortcuts for that too. So to get to the rotation property, the keyboard shortcut is R, scale is S, position is P, and opacity, like the transparency of the layer, is T. So I'm going to hit R and then just rotate this and move them into an arrangement that looks good. If you have properties and a bunch of different layers open, you can close them all by having nothing selected and hitting U. Hitting U also shows keyframed properties, but we don't need to worry about that yet. Now let's arrange these little cocoa nibs. I'm just going to select them all and move them over so I can see them better. Once you're happy with how your arrangement looks, let's start setting some keyframes to make things move. Let's start by animating the chocolate bar and package so that they start off screen and animate into place. I'm going to move my playhead over to 2 seconds and 15 frames, and then open up the chocolate package. Any property that has a little stopwatch icon next to it can be keyframed. To start setting keyframes on a property, you want to just click the stopwatch. That's going to set a keyframe wherever your playhead is. So keyframes tell After Effects I want this layer to be in this position at this time. Then I'm going to move my playhead over to the start of this layer, so 1 second, 15 frames, and I'm going to set another keyframe. Once you've set an initial keyframe, there's a few ways that you can set additional keyframes. So the first way is that I could just take this layer and drag it down. And if you hold down Shift, it'll make sure you only drag it vertically. And you can see that that's automatically created another keyframe. So if I hit spacebar, we have an animation. I'm just going to delete this keyframe and show you that another way to set keyframes is to adjust these values. So you can just click and drag over them to adjust them, kind of like a slider. So I can also set a keyframe like that. I'm going to delete that keyframe and show you that another way that you can set keyframes is by clicking on these numbers so that you can actually edit the value. And again, that creates a keyframe wherever your playhead is. So now the package is animating up. Let's also animate the rotation. So at 2 seconds, 15 frames, I want it to be rotated like this. So I'll click the stopwatch to set a keyframe. Then when this layer starts, let's have it just start from a rotation of 0. So I'm just going to type in 0. Now this animation looks like that. I'm going to close up this layer and basically do the same thing for the chocolate bar. So now both the bar and the packaging animate up and rotate. Sometimes you may want to adjust keyframes that you've already set. So if I wanted this animation to go faster, what I would need to do is drag the keyframes so that they're closer together, less distance between them on the timeline. I'm going to undo that. You also might want to adjust your keyframes by changing the values of them. To do that, just put your playhead over the keyframe, and then you can adjust the value in any way that you wanted. So you could pick up that layer on the composition viewer and move it over, or you could drag the numbers here, or click to type in numbers. I'm going to select the chocolate package and the chocolate bar and hit U on the keyboard to bring up all the properties that have keyframes set. Right now this animation is really boring because it's linear. It moves at the same speed the entire time. But most things in real life don't move linearly. They accelerate and decelerate. So let's add a bit of that to this animation. I'm going to click and drag over all of these keyframes to select them all. And then right click on any one of the keyframes, and then go to Keyframe Assistant and then Easy Ease. Notice how the keyframes have switched to this hourglass shape, whereas before, I'll undo that, they were diamonds. Another way to apply Easy Ease is with the keyboard shortcut, which is F9. And remember, on a Mac, you have to press the FN key and F9. Let's play back the animation. So you can see that the animation starts out slow and then moves more quickly in the center and then ends slow. If you want to see a visual of this with your keyframe selected, you can click this little button here to go into the graph editor. What we're looking at now is the speed graph, and this shows the speed over time. The purple is position, and the cyan is the rotation. Let's just focus on the position property right now. You can also look at a value graph. So if you click this menu right here, you can change to the value graph. This shows you a separated out X and Y value for the position property. So this is going to be the Y value, and this is the X value, which isn't changing, so it's a flat line. For this particular property, in this particular animation, it's going to be easier to look at the speed graph, but it's just good to know that there's two different graphs there in case you're ever confused why yours doesn't look like mine or something, but I'll talk way more about the graph editor in the course. For now, if you want to, you can adjust this graph. Let's just select all of these properties again, and we can adjust the graph for all of them all at once. So I'm going to click and drag to select all of these handles. They're all on top of each other, but I need to select them all. And then I'm going to grab this little yellow handle and pull this all the way so that the graph looks like this. So this means it's going to start off slow, quickly increase speed, reach a peak speed here, and then start decelerating and slowing down until it reaches the end. This will make the bars come to a nice smooth stop. Now, instead of a boring linear animation, it shoots in, then eases to a stop, which is much more interesting. Learning how to adjust motion in the graph editor is key to making your animations look professional. I'm going to close up these layers by hitting U on the keyboard, and now let's animate all the cacao nibs and beans. I'm going to move my playhead to 2 seconds 15 frames and then select all of the beans and all of the nibs. And I'm going to show you a shortcut to animate a bunch of things at once. So I know that I want the position of all of these layers to be here at 2 seconds 15 frames, so I'm going to hit the P key and then just click the stopwatch on any one of these layers and it will create a keyframe for all of the selected layers. Then I'm going to move my playhead to the start of these layers, and I want them all to start in the center of the screen and then animate out, kind of like a little explosion. So what I'm going to do with all of these cocoa nibs and beans still selected is I'm going to use the align tools to align them to the composition. So I'll just vertically and horizontally align them. You can see these little lines represent the motion path, so the position property mapped visually in the composition viewer. There's a couple issues with this. The first is that I don't want the beans and the nibs to be on top of the bars, so I'm going to select all of those layers, and then I'll bring them below the chocolate package and chocolate bar. So now they're coming out from behind the bar and the chocolate. I also want to make their animation a little bit more interesting like I did for the bar and the package. So I'm going to select all of these layers again, hit U to bring up all of the keyframes, and then I'm just going to click and drag over all of these keyframes to select them all. Then right click on any one of the selected keyframes, go to Keyframe Assistant, and then Easy Ease. So now this will give them a slow, fast, slow animation, but to make this even more interesting, I'm going to go into the graph editor, select all of the handles on the right side here, and then drag this handle all the way over so the graphs look like this. So now if I play this back, it looks a lot more interesting than it did before. But I don't like how you can see this big cluster of things starting in the middle, so I'm going to offset my keyframes. Let's just hit U to close up all of the layers. I'm going to select the first bean and then hold down Shift and select the last nib, and then let's start these a little bit later, so maybe at 2 seconds. In order to drag the entire layer, make sure that you're dragging from somewhere in the middle and that you see the regular mouse icon as your cursor. If you drag from the start, you're going to be trimming the layer. So if we trim the layer, it's going to mess up the keyframe, so we will only see part of that animation. So make sure that you're dragging the entire layer like this, and then the keyframes still start at the start of the layer, and that's just now at 2 seconds. So let's see what this looks like. Step 4, the optional step, is to add additional properties to your layers to change their appearance or add properties that can be animated. There's a couple ways you can do this. So for this text layer, let's add a text animator preset that will animate the text in. So I'm going to go down to the text layer, and then I'm going to go to the Effects and Presets panel, and underneath Animation Presets, and then Presets, and then Text, and then Animate In, there's going to be a bunch of different options that you can use to animate your text in. To be honest, a lot of these presets look a bit outdated, but there's some good ones, and they tend to be the more simple ones. I'm going to use this preset called Slide Down by Character. So I'll just drag that onto my text layer. Then if I hit U on the keyboard, you can see that that preset has set some keyframes, and the animation looks like this. I'm going to make the animation go a little bit faster, so I'll just take this second keyframe and drag it backward. You can also add effects to layers. So say I want to make a little bit of a glow behind the chocolate bars. I'm first going to need a shape layer to add the effect to. So I'm going to go up to the shape tool, click and hold, and grab the ellipse tool. I'm going back to step 2 here to create another asset, but this is totally normal. When I'm creating an animation, I'm often jumping between these steps, not always doing them in order. So I'm just going to click and drag to create a circle, and I'm going to hold down Shift to make sure that it maintains a perfect circle. And then I'm going to go up to the fill color and change this to white. And then let's just move this circle into the center. So I'm going to switch back to my selection tool by hitting V. And then let's close up effects and presets and use the align tools to center the circle. I'll just rename this and bring it behind all of my other layers except for in front of the background. Then let's go over to effects and presets and let's search for an effect. There are over 200 effects, so it's not a great use of time to try to learn them all. I only consistently use a handful. I'm going to search for blur, and I'll use the fast box blur. And since the circle layer is already selected, I can just double click to apply the effect. Or you can drag and drop the effect, that works too. Notice how that's added the effect to the layer in the timeline. So if I toggle this open, you can see fast box blur and all of its properties, or the effect control panel usually pops up when you add an effect, and you can adjust it here. This and this are the same exact things. So I'm going to increase the blur radius. And then if you want to tone down this entire layer, you could use the opacity property. So I'm just going to hit T to bring up the opacity and then just bring this down a bit. Another way that you can add additional properties to either change the appearance or add animation to your layers is with layer styles. So I'm going to select one of the cacao beans. Then I'll right click on the layer, go to layer styles, and then I'm going to add a drop shadow. If I toggle open drop shadow, I have a bunch of new properties that I can adjust or animate. So I'm going to increase the distance, maybe let's do 10, and then the size, and then I'm going to change the opacity to make this more subtle. Now the cacao bean kind of pops off the page a little bit more. So once you're happy with how it looks, you can easily apply the same layer style to other layers. So I'll just select where it says drop shadow, hit Command C to copy this drop shadow, and then I'm going to go into all of my other cacao beans, and then I'll just paste that layer style. And let's do the same thing on the cacao nibs. And we can even add that to the chocolate package and the chocolate bar. So now everything just has a little bit more dimensionality to it. Here's the final animation. The final step is to export or render in After Effects terms your animation. So to do that, go up to Composition, Add to Render Queue. If you don't have specific settings that you know you need to export as, then the default settings are probably good. This is going to create an MP4 file. If you do need to change the file type that it exports, then click this blue text here to get all of the settings. You also are going to want to choose where you want to export the video to, so click here, and then you can navigate to where on your computer you want to save this. I like to create a new folder called Out for all of my exports. And then just hit render. And then here's the video file that I rendered. If this video made After Effects feel a little less intimidating, that's exactly what my beginner course is designed to do. The course walks you through practical, beginner-friendly projects that focus on the fundamentals. Things like keyframes, timing, shape layers, parenting, mats, reusing compositions, and much more. So you're not just watching tutorials, you're actually building skills. The projects are especially relevant if you're interested in creating explainer-style animations, but the skills are applicable to all types of motion graphics. If you're new to After Effects and want a clear, structured starting point, check out the course using the link below.